How do you ask questions in German? By the end of this video, you'll know how to build both simple yes and no questions and open questions with German question words. I'll show you word order tips, common mistakes, and some real examples you can use right away. First, let's start with the basic idea. We have two simple kinds of questions in German. Yes and no questions. Those are answered with ja or nein. For example, kommst du? Are you coming? And secondly, we have open-ended questions. These begin with a question word like who, what, where, when, why, or how. So if we're building open-ended questions, we'll start with the question word first, the verb, and then the subject. Wo wohnst du? Where do you live? Here's a pronunciation tip. For yes/no questions, your voice usually rises at the end. And for what questions, it falls because you expect a longer answer. Let's go into detail about those yes and no questions. We're going to put the conjugated verb first, then our subject second. Here's an example. Bist du müde? Bist du müde? Are you tired? Hast du Zeit? Hast du Zeit? Do you have time? Kannst du mir helfen? Can you help me? Arbeitet heute? Is he working today? Kommt der Bus bald? Is the bus coming soon? Here's a little trick. If you can answer with yes or no in English, make a verb-first question in German. Here's some common mistakes. You wouldn't say, du bist müde. We would say, bist du müde? You might hear the wrong version in spoken German, but for practice, use the correct verb-first order. How would we turn these statements into yes or no questions? Du hast Zeit. Hast du Zeit? Sie arbeitet morgen. Arbeitet sie morgen? Remember to raise your pitch slightly at the end of the yes or no question. Let's look at the question words in German. Let's look at those question words in German. Wer? Who? Wer ist das? Who is that? Was? What? Was machst du? What are you doing? Wann? Wann beginnt der Kurs? When does the class start? Wo? Where? Wo ist die Haltestelle? Where's the station? Warum? Why? Warum lernst du Deutsch? Why are you learning German? Wie? How or what way? Wie heißt du? What's your name? Wie geht's? How are you? Welcher? Welche or welches? Which? They have to agree with the gender of the word. Welches Buch möchtest du? Which book do you want? Here we have the question word, plus the verb, the subject, and the rest of the sentence. And some mistakes that beginners make are mixing was und wie. Was ist das? What is that? Wie ist das? How is that? They have different meanings. Let's look at questions that use the accusative or direct object. If a question asks about the person or thing that receives the action, and it has a direct object, use an accusative question word. The classic accusative question word for people is wen, or whom. For things, cases shown by article pronoun or by preposition. Let's look at some examples. Wen rufst du an? Wen rufst du an? Whom are you calling? Who are you calling? Wen siehst du im Kino? Who do you see at the cinema? Wen hat sie eingeladen? Whom did she invite? Was kaufst du? What are you buying? Welchen Film willst du sehen? Which film do you want to see? See how masculine welcher changes to welchen in accusative. And why is it accusative? The answer replaces the question word with an accusative pronoun or an accusative noun. Let's look at some example phrases. Wen rufst du an? Ich rufe ihn an. I call him. Ihn is accusative of er. Was kaufst du? Ich kaufe einen Apfel. Einen Apfel is accusative. Here's a little beginner trick to check the case. Replace the answer with a short pronoun. And if the sentence needs ihn, sie, es, mich, it's accusative. If you answer ich sehe ihn, then the question must be wen, not wer. Next, let's look at questions that use the dative, indirect object. If a question asks to whom or for whom something is done, and there's an indirect object, we use dative. The question word is wem, or for whom, with an M. Dative also appears after many prepositions, mit, zu, bei, aus, nach, von, und seit. Let's look at some examples. Wem gibst du das Buch? To whom are you giving the book? Who are you giving the book to? Mit wem gehst du ins Kino? With whom are you going to the cinema? Mit is a dative preposition, so we're using dative wem. Here's how you can check. You replace the dative pronoun, wem gibst du das Buch? If the answer is, I'm giving the book to him, we have an indirect object and we're using dative. Or, mit wem fährst du? With whom are you driving? Ich fahre mit ihr. Ihr is dative of sie. So we would use the dative form here, wem. Some prepositions always take dative, and some always take accusative. So you want to watch out for those, because they might trip you up sometimes. The accusative prepositions are für, durch, ohne, and bis. So if these appear first in your questions, use für wen. Für wen ist das Geschenk? For whom is the present? Here, für takes accusative. And just be aware that many German prepositions decide whether the object is accusative or dative. Let's look at one more topic, prepositional question words, or compound forms. Many prepositions combine with wo to make a compact question word. You can spot these like this. Womit? With what? Womit schreibst du? What are you writing with? Woran? Worauf? Woraus? Wofür? Worüber? Wohin? These are just some of the ways you can use wo and a preposition. For example, worauf wartest du? What are you waiting for? Here's a little beginner tip. If your question uses wo plus a preposition, womit, worüber, you don't add extra case words. The compound already signals the right construction. So let's practice. Worüber lachst du? Über den Witz. What are you laughing about? About the joke. Alright, so now you know how to ask basic yes or no questions in German, you know how to use question words in German, and you know how they work in the accusative and dative cases. Of course, it'll take more practice to get used to all of these ideas. This is a very grammar-heavy topic. Remember to go to mygermanizedlife.com for all your German learning resources, practice exercises, downloadable printable flashcards, and everything you need to learn German. Bis nächstes Mal. Auf Wiedersehen.